My name is Savannah Brown. I'm 25 years old. The night my parents asked me to give up my future for my younger brother, they didn't hesitate. They didn't even pretend it was a difficult decision. I remember the exact moment it happened. We were sitting at the same dinner table I grew up at, the yellow light above us, making everything look dull, almost tired, like the room already knew something I didn't. My plate was still full. No one was eating. My mother kept wiping her hands on a dish towel that didn't need wiping over and over. My father sat across from me, arms folded, staring at the table like he was rehearsing something in his head, and my younger brother Ethan sat between them, quiet, calm, not nervous, not ashamed, just waiting. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Then my father finally spoke. "Your brother needs help." His voice was steady, practiced. I nodded slowly, still not understanding. "Okay, what kind of help?" My mother answered before he could. "He's gotten himself into some financial trouble." I let out a small breath. That part wasn't surprising. Ethan had always been like that. Bad decisions, quick excuses, promises that never lasted. I had lost count of how many times he'd needed help, but something in the way they were looking at me made my chest tighten. "How much?" I asked. There was a pause, not a normal one, the kind where someone is thinking, but the kind where the answer is bigger than the question. My parents exchanged a look, and in that single second, something inside me shifted. I didn't know what it was yet, but I felt it like a quiet warning I couldn't ignore. Then my father leaned forward slightly. "It's not just about money." I didn't move, didn't speak. My mother's voice softened, like she was explaining something obvious. "We want you to take responsibility for him. Help with his rent, his debts, support him until he gets back on his feet." For a moment, I thought I misheard her. I actually waited for someone to smile, to laugh, to say it was a joke. No one did. Ethan still hadn't looked at me. He just sat there staring at the table like this had already been decided, like I was just there to agree. "You want me to—" "What?" I asked quietly. My father finally looked up. "You need to step up. You're the stable one. You can handle it." And that was it. No hesitation, no guilt, no apology, just a decision. Something dropped in my chest, heavy and final. All those years of working late, saving carefully, saying no to things I wanted, suddenly made sense. It had never been just my future. It was a backup plan for him. And the worst part wasn't what they were asking. It was how easily they asked it. Like I wasn't their daughter. Like I was just the solution. Looking back, that dinner didn't come out of nowhere. It only felt that way because I had spent most of my life pretending not to notice the pattern. In my family, there were always two versions of the truth. The one they told everyone, and the one I lived. Ethan was going through a phase. I was the strong one. Ethan just needed support. I didn't need much. It sounded harmless when they said it like that. Almost fair, but it never was. When Ethan dropped out of his first job after 3 weeks, it wasn't the right fit. When he borrowed money and didn't return it, he was under pressure. When he made promises and broke them, there was always a reason waiting for him before accountability ever had a chance. And me? I learned early that excuses didn't belong to me. When I struggled, I was told to figure it out. When I worked late, it was expected. When I saved money, it became proof that I had more to give. I wasn't praised for being responsible. I was positioned slowly and quietly, like a solution waiting to be used. There were moments I ignored back then, like when I helped pay one of Ethan's debts a few years ago. My parents called it temporary, but he never paid me back, and no one ever mentioned it again. Or when I canceled a trip I had been planning for months because my mother said things were tight at home, only to find out later Ethan had been given money that same week. I didn't confront them. I told myself it wasn't worth the conflict, that family was complicated, that keeping the peace mattered more than being right. But peace, I learned, can be one-sided. Because every time I stayed quiet, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for them to believe I would always bend, always understand, always adjust, always sacrifice. And Ethan learned it too. He stopped asking for help like it was a favor. He started expecting it like it was his right. By the time that dinner happened, the roles were already written. He was the one who needed saving, and I was the one who was supposed to save him. Not because it was fair, but because I always had. "I'm not doing that," I said. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The room just sat there, heavy and still, like the air itself didn't know how to move anymore. Then my mother exhaled slowly. I didn't think you'd be this selfish." The word landed harder than I expected. Selfish. After everything I had done without being asked. After years of being the one who didn't create problems, didn't need saving, didn't ask for anything in return. My father didn't raise his voice. That made it worse. "If you're not willing to support your own brother, I don't know what kind of person that makes you." I didn't answer, because anything I said would have turned into an argument I had already lost in their eyes. Ethan finally spoke, still not looking at me. "I guess I know where I stand." And somehow that stung too. Not because it was true, but because he got to say it like he was the one being abandoned. I stood up. My chair scraped softly against the floor, too loud in the silence. No one stopped me. No one asked me to stay. No one said we'd figure something else out. I walked out of that house, and no one followed. And that was the moment I understood. My answer hadn't just disappointed them. It had changed my place in the family, from dependable to disposable. The messages started the next morning. My mother texted first. Long paragraphs about family, responsibility, sacrifice. Words that sounded warm on the surface but carried something heavier underneath. My father's messages were shorter, colder. "Think carefully about your decision. You're making a mistake." Then came the calls. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in months telling me I should be grateful. A cousin reminding me, "He's your blood." Someone even said, "You'll regret this when it's too late." No one asked what I had already given. No one asked how it felt to sit there and be told my life was something negotiable. They only asked why I wouldn't give more. After a few days, I stopped responding. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion, because every conversation followed the same script. They weren't trying to understand me. They were trying to move me, push me, bend me back into the role they had already chosen for me. So I went quiet, and eventually they did too. The calls slowed, the messages stopped, the pressure disappeared, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like being erased. I would pick up my phone sometimes expecting something, a message, a missed call, anything that showed I still mattered outside of what I could provide. There was nothing. That was the part no one talks about. Not the arguments, not the accusations. The silence that comes after people realize you're no longer useful to them. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being asked to give anything. And somehow, that hurt more than being asked for everything. The first few weeks felt unfamiliar, like I had stepped out of a life that had always been loud with expectations and into something still. No calls asking for favors, no subtle guilt, no reminders of who I was supposed to be for everyone else. At first, I didn't know what to do with that kind of silence. Then slowly, I started using it. I went back to the routines I had before everything became about them. Work, saving, small habits that didn't look important from the outside but held everything together on the inside. I stopped explaining my choices, stopped preparing myself to defend every decision. For the first time, I was making plans that didn't include sacrifice. I paid off the last of my own commitments, started putting money aside again. Not for emergencies that weren't mine, but for things I had delayed for years. A better place, more stability, options. I didn't rush anything. That was the difference. Before, I was always reacting, fixing, adjusting, moving quickly, so no one else had to feel the consequences of their decisions. Now everything was slower, intentional. I enrolled in a professional course I had been postponing. Nothing dramatic, just something that moved me forward instead of keeping me in place. After work, instead of answering calls or solving someone else's problems, I sat with my own thoughts. Sometimes that was uncomfortable, but it was honest. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. How often I had felt responsible for things that were never mine. How easily I had accepted being the reliable one without questioning what it cost me. How quickly I used to say yes just to avoid conflict. That changed. Not all at once, not loudly, just in small decisions. Saying no without over-explaining. Not answering calls I didn't want to take. Letting silence stay silent instead of filling it with apologies. There wasn't a moment where everything suddenly made sense. Just a gradual shift where I stopped seeing myself as someone who needed to earn her place and started seeing myself as someone who already had one. Work improved too, but not in a dramatic overnight way. I showed up more focused, less distracted. Opportunities I used to hesitate on felt easier to take because I wasn't carrying everyone else's weight anymore. It wasn't success in the way people usually describe it. It was stability. Peace. The kind that doesn't need to be explained to anyone. Months passed like that. No contact, no updates, no sudden apologies, just distance. But every now and then, usually late at night, a thought would cross my mind. Not about what I had lost, about what would happen if they came back. Not with understanding, with need. And for the first time, I didn't feel anxious about that possibility. I felt ready. It happened on an ordinary evening. No warning, no build-up. Just my phone lighting up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Mom. I stared at it for a second before answering. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Careful. Like she wasn't sure how much space she was allowed to take anymore. She asked how I was. Asked about work. Small, safe questions that avoided everything that had actually happened. I let her talk. Then eventually, the real reason surfaced. Ethan wasn't doing better. The money they had given him was gone. The fresh start they believed in had lasted a few weeks, maybe less. He had fallen back into the same patterns. Missed payments, broken promises, new problems layered on top of the old ones. Only this time, my parents were the ones dealing with it directly. And they were tired. I could hear it in her voice. Not just frustration. Something closer to realization. Like she was finally standing in the same place I had been standing in for years. We've tried everything, she said quietly. We just thought, maybe you'd reconsider. There it was. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement. Just the same request, wrapped in softer words. I leaned back in my chair, looking around my apartment, the one I had chosen, the one I had built without pressure, without guilt attached to every decision. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I remembered. Every time I stayed quiet to keep the peace. Every time I was told to understand. Every time my effort was treated like something they were entitled to. And I realized something simple. Nothing had changed. They were just asking in a quieter voice. Nothing's changed, I said. The words came out calm, flat, not emotional, not angry, just clear. There was a pause on the other end of the call. I could hear her breathing shift, like she hadn't expected that answer. What do you mean? My mother asked, softer now, almost careful. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes drifting across the room. The shelves I had filled slowly, the desk I had saved for, the quiet that no longer felt empty. I already helped when I said no the first time. Silence, not the heavy, suffocating kind from that dinner months ago. This one felt different, like something had finally landed. If I had said yes, I continued, my voice steady, he would still be in the same place, just with my future added to the damage. Her breath caught slightly. I could hear it. For a moment, I almost imagined she understood. Not agreed, just understood. But then she spoke again. We're family, she said. The same words, the same logic, just softer, and somehow weaker. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to explain it in a way that would make her feel better. Family doesn't mean I stop having a life of my own. Another pause. Longer this time. I could feel the shift happening. Not in me, but on the other end of the call. The slow realization that I wasn't going to step back into the role they had built for me. Savannah, she started, but her voice faltered, like she didn't know how to finish the sentence without saying the same thing again. Not this time, I said, not anymore. I can't do this. And for once, I didn't explain. I didn't soften it. I didn't offer alternatives. I didn't leave the door open. Because this wasn't about convincing her. It was about being clear. There was no argument, no guilt, no pressure layered underneath her words this time. Just a quiet, okay. And then the call ended. That was it. No dramatic ending, no raised voices, no final accusations. Just a simple moment where everything reversed. For years, they had decided what I owed them. Now, for the first time, I decided what I didn't. A few days later, my mother sent a message. Short, careful. We understand. Take care of yourself. I read it twice. Not because it meant something deep, but because of what it didn't say. No apology, no acknowledgement, no mention of that night, or everything that came after. Just acceptance, without reflection. I didn't reply, not out of anger. There was just nothing left to continue. Over the next few weeks, I heard things through other people. Small updates, passed along like background noise. Ethan had moved back in with my parents. There were arguments, tension, the kind of quiet stress that doesn't explode but never really leaves the room. For the first time, they were living inside the situation they had tried to hand off to me, and there was no one else to carry it. Some relatives who had been quick to judge me before stopped reaching out altogether. Others became strangely neutral, like they were slowly realizing the story they had been told wasn't complete. No one called me selfish anymore. They just stopped calling. And this silence, it felt different. It didn't feel like rejection. It felt like distance. The kind you choose. My life didn't transform overnight. There was no sudden success, no dramatic turning point where everything became perfect, just something steadier. I woke up without tension sitting in my chest. I made decisions without calculating how they would affect everyone else. I kept what I earned. I protected what I built. And most importantly, I stopped waiting for people to treat me fairly, because I finally understood fairness had never been part of the system I came from. Months passed, then more. No more calls asking for help. No more pressure, no more expectations, just a quiet separation that no one tried to fix. Sometimes I still think about that night at the dinner table. Not with anger, not even with sadness, just clarity. Because that was the moment everything became visible. Not who Ethan was, not even who my parents were, but who I had been to them all along. Not the daughter they protected, not the one they worried about, just the one they could rely on, until I stopped being available. And once I did, there was nothing left for them to hold on to. So they let go, and for the first time in my life, so did I.